right, thank you, Marianne. Just by way of introduction, I'm actually curious with respect to the ground we're going to cover during this short course and the level of detail with which we're going to discuss some of the protocols and the things that we all consider in biobanking. How many people here actually are working with an established biobank, actually involved with running a biobank and the day-to-day activities? Great. And how many people here are just users of biobanks? All right, part of the problem, right? Right there. And that's how I'm going to start off. And then just also out of curiosity, how many people are here from the East Coast? West Coast? And other? Okay. So, because there was also a lot of discussion when Mary and I were talking about this meeting is, where's the best place to have this? It's not necessarily where all the actual biobanks are, but it depends on, who your target audience is. And I think that for today, for what Lisa and I hope to cover during this short course is all of the right people are here. People that are either involved in established biobanks or in the process of doing the kinds of things we all do, or those that are looking to get into it. And one of the things that we need to address as a group when we start to talk about how useful this resource is and how to make it most easily accessible and reliable for those that are going to access those samples are the protocols that stand behind those samples. We all get very different kinds of questions. We all have very different kinds of responsibilities with respect to our collections. However, at the end of the day, for those that are using these resources now or in the future, there needs to be some level of conformity, some level of consistency, because the analyses that are being done that we're aware of have limitations. But the thing that keeps me up at night are the things that people are going to do with samples that we haven't even thought about. And I think a very good example of that is what's gone on over the years in the recent past with gene expression as an example. There are huge resources in formalin-fixed, paraffin-embedded tissues that have been saved for decades. And at really no time, because gene expression was not an evolved technology, molecular biology was in its infancy, even after these samples were being collected, there are a lot of limitations to the use of some samples. And I think that in itself has shed a lot of light on how repositories work, how they should be designed, and how they should be run to plan for the future where we're not only really sure the extent of what kinds of analyses and the length of time these samples are going to be around. So with that said, the first hour or the first half of the course here is going to focus on how you develop a protocol or how you develop a process for creating a renewable resource. And the focus here is on renewable biological resources, at least from my perspective for the RUCDR, which is the Rutgers University Cell and DNA Repository. That's what we do. And I'm going to define, from my perspective, what a sample is, what a biobank is, and what a renewable resource is, and then go through some protocol development from there. I think that the principles are the same, whether you are responsible for a tissue bank or a DNA bank or a cell bank or even something of a hybrid. The principles for protocol development, for consistency, for being responsible not just scientifically but fiscally, all share a common theme. And hopefully that's what you'll see and you'll be able to apply it to what you do. I think the very first thing to define is what is a sample. Everybody has a different impression as to what a sample is or a different interpretation. Certainly, it's any material collected from an animal or human. That's pretty much where my program ends. But I learned in going around and not always being in the biobanking business, but I can tell you how I got there in a couple of slides when I just briefly give you an overview of the RUCDR. But it goes well beyond that. And in fact, these are not the largest biobanks by a long shot. And we've worked with a number of groups in protocol development and some of the things that we do where the processes and the procedures are directly translatable. But compared to other areas, this is not the largest. Doesn't mean that it's not going to be. Certainly, there are banks or samples that are specific to cell lines. Their list of services, their responsibilities are very different from a sample procurement and processing and distribution standpoint, but they're a sample nonetheless. And then certainly agricultural samples. And this is actually where there are huge banks. However, the resources for banking these samples are pale in comparison to working with animal and human cells. So the challenges there are different, not from a technology perspective, but from an operational and fiscal perspective. One of the things I'd like to point out is really what the difference between, in my opinion, a stored sample and a biobank sample is. So a stored sample is somebody that gives you something and you hold it on to them, and at some point in time they come to you and say, I'd like that back, and you say, okay, here you go. And they'd say, well, what did you do with the sample during that time? And you said, absolutely nothing. You told me to keep it here, and that's where it is. You need to be able to find that sample. You need to be able to demonstrate that for the lifetime that you had that sample, it was where it was supposed to be, i.e. at the right temperature and the right condition. A biobank sample is a little bit different, or a bank sample in my definition. A bank sample is a sample that's proactively acquired for future testing and analysis. So that's a sample that's collected. It may be stored as you receive it. It may need to be processed and cataloged or defined. But then that sample is used for some sort of analysis or some sort of more global application. Okay. Again, when you're operating or running a repository, storage is a big component of what you do. It's everything else in a biobank that I think kind of presents challenges that need to be addressed in either protocol development or in operational requirements. Not that companies or labs that store samples, that there are no challenges associated with it. There are many. But when you biobank samples with respect to manipulating them, processing them, distributing them, and being responsible ultimately for their quality, I think that's where it presents unique challenges. So what's a biorepository? That is